Cool. So everyone see the agenda, right? The shared screen. Great. So welcome everyone to Carvel community meeting. Today is January 27th. We're excited to meet again. So you'll see the agenda that we have it up here, and you'll see also the maintainers joining today. So if you're a maintainer, wave your hands so that we can see you. Good to see you all. Beautiful faces. So today we're gonna start with announcements, what we're working on, and then we have a few topics that we want to talk about today. And as always, you can find the recordings on YouTube, or if you're actually watching, you're on YouTube already. So announcements here. Big announcements. Please note that we're making changes to this community meeting. We're no longer gonna meet on every other Wednesdays, but we're gonna meet every Monday. So more frequently, you get to see us at 11:30 Pacific time. So Los Angeles or San Francisco time, or Portland, Seattle time. There, 11:30 every Monday. So you'll get an updated invite. So be on the lookout for it. You'll still be able to connect to the same Zoom link, so don't worry about that. So see you next Monday. And another big announcement is that we are gonna move to GitHub projects. So so far the maintainers, we've been using a different tool, and we're moving to GitHub projects so that folks in the community have greater visibility in what we're working on, and so that you can also chime in and contribute together. So starting next week, you'll see all the work that we're gonna do reflected on the Carvel GitHub project. So we'll add a link to this agenda later too, once we have it ready, but I wanted to share that out. Another thing that is exciting is, so we want to try out GitHub issue voting, or what we're calling like a feature voting. So we want to hear from you what you would want us to work on next. So if you go to GitHub, let's go to it real quick. We go to issues, and then if you click onto an issue, you'll see there is I'm not signed in. So if you're signed in, there is a emoji where you can react to it by throwing a thumbs up. So if you see a particular issue and you're signed into GitHub, please let us know what issue that you would like us to work on, or what you would like to contribute on by throwing that thumbs up. We're hoping to get this experiment going and see whether we can get your thoughts reflected in how we prioritize. So yeah, we'll share that again next week, and then also let you know exactly where you can do that voting. So we have a few releases. So image package version 0.3. We have now we're introducing this concept of image package bundles. So you can read more about that here in this link. And then we also are supporting this copy command where you can relocate bundles. So read more, and then there are some bug fixes along with it. So you can look into each GitHub issues. Next one is Kbuild version 0.28. So if I go back to this release page. So because of the changes that we have made with image package, we had some, we've also refactored the Kbuild. It's supporting the new format of image packages, image lock. And then also, so yeah, if you want to learn more about that, check out our docs. Again, our docs are now at our website, carvel.dev, so check into that. And a new features for build kit. So thanks to Dustin and Andrew, who worked on this release. We are excited that we see other community members contributing to our project. So thank you, and welcome. So those are the big announcements we have. Also, Carrie and Dennis will be able to share what we're currently working on. So Carrie, do you want to kick us off on what we're working on there with YTT?
Sure. Yeah, just a quick update on what we've been working on lately. So for one of our tools, the YAML templating tool, YTT, we're working on a feature for adding schema support. So this will basically be a way to specify exactly what inputs that you expect into your data values and your templates in YTT. As part of the schemas work, we really want to get something well-rounded and complete into the hands of users as soon as possible. So we have been focusing on improving our error messages around schemas. So we added some features to basically make the error messages consistent across schemas, and also to add a little bit of information around where an error is happening in your schema and what we expected. So hopefully that information plus we have a few hints to help you get going and debugging in schemas. And then another thing we've been working on is a schema file as data values. Helen, if you want to click on that link, it might be a good visual. So this is basically the way that YTT works right now is you basically add your inputs to YTT as a data values file. Well, when our schema feature comes out, you can actually provide your data values and your schema in the same file. So it's a way to provide what you can think of as default values into YTT. Feel free to check out this doc. It's got a lot of helpful information on schemas, the syntax, what you can expect. It's really the source of information for the project. Yeah, that's it.
Thanks, Carrie. Dennis, what about what's new? What are we cooking in image package there?
Yeah, so the non-distributable layers feature, this is a feature that's going to be really useful for folk that want to run images in an air-gapped environment, in an internetless environment, that they want to run an image that contains a layer that has been marked as a non-distributable layer. And currently, without this feature implemented, that's not possible. This feature is all about introducing a new flag, -- include, it says here foreign layers, but it's going to be called -- include non-distributable layers, where it's a flag for the copy command. And if you specify that flag to the copy command, when you copy an image that contains a layer that has been marked as non-distributable, it's going to get copied from the source to the target. So in the before use case, you have an air-gapped environment, you have an image, let's say it's a Windows Microsoft image that has a layer that's been marked as non-distributable. You use the copy command with this flag, you copy that image to a tarball, you put that tarball on a USB disk, and you go to your data center. It's an air-gapped environment, and then you upload that tarball to a registry. Now your registry inside your air-gapped environment has a Microsoft image that has a non-distributable layer, and you can use that to run in your Kubernetes cluster or however you want to run that image. Currently still in flight. If I was to make a bet, it would probably land on the next release of image package.
Cool. Thanks for the update, Dennis. Okay, so we have a last announcements here. So we have new web pages for now image package and vendor. So if you recall, a few weeks ago, we announced that we have new pages for each of the projects and also like a whole refresh of Carvel.dev. Now you can click into image package and also vendor to learn more about those two specific tools. So you have each of the pages also have their own documentations and so you can now go to Carvel.dev to read all the docs instead of needing to go to GitHub. One project is still pending, so Cat Controller is still linking to GitHub docs, so that we are currently actively working on, but all the rest of the docs, you can come here to carvel.dev. So now let's move on to discussion. So I see 2 topics added here. And as a reminder, community members, y'all can add a topic here. We usually have this agenda up ahead of the time. So even with our weekly, new community meetings, we'll still have some of the discussion times available. So please throw in a topic there if you want to discuss. So I see the first topic is assertion library discussion. Whoever added this item could maybe speak to it.
Was I the one?
I don't know. Was it you, John?
Did you add it, John, or did I do? No, you don't.
I mean, I want to talk about this, and I thought we were, but I wasn't the guy to put the words on the page. No.
Maybe that was
But
me.
yeah, you wanna kick us off, man? I know you've been doing some exploration
kick
here.
us off.
Cool. And do you have your example or the PR? That might be a good thing for us
yes,
to be
I was
looking
gonna
at.
ask.
I
could share my screen.
Yeah.
Cool.
There.
I just. Oop, there we go. I'm gonna share my screen. And I see. Okay, can y'all see my screen? My nice discussion topic in GitHub. Cool. So this is basically just like the discussion topic that I created underneath Carvel so we can talk about this. And what's the why behind this? So currently if we look at our tests and the way that they are set up, I feel like that they are a little bit hard to read. So if we take an example, for example, like in YTT, let's go to image package. Right. So if we take a look at our end-to-end tests and to these bundle tests, we can see that the big thing that is telling us what this what this test is doing is like this huge name here that we have here. And personally, as this is like a personal note, I'm not very good at reading snake case sentences, but yeah, so this was one of like the first pain points that I had when I joined this project, is that for me it was a little bit hard to understand the content like of each test, because I felt like I needed like a bigger sentence in English to tell me what this test was doing. And like the way the tests are structured as well, sometimes it was not like straightforward to try to understand what they were doing. They were doing like a lot of setup on them, and it was hard to understand like where the setup started and where did the test, the effective assertions started, and what were part of the assertions and what were not. So in order to try to get this, try to understand, like, is there like a different way that could be easier for people to understand what we're testing here? I thought maybe that we can, if we add maybe a testing framework that would decouple like these informations, like these parts of the tests, that could give us like a little bit more an easier way for us to read what the test was about. That would be interesting. So I did a quick Google and I added some options here that currently we're using the Golang vanilla, like what comes from the standard library testing framework. And it works pretty good, right? Like there's a lot of prior art in a lot of projects that have this as their testing framework. Then I added like 2 other frameworks that I knew about. One is Spec, that is just like a fine, thin, very thin wrapper on top of testing framework that it's not linking. Whoa, outrageous. Oh, what is that? Okay, I think there's like a problem with that link. That it's basically just a thin wrapper on top of the test, but it gives it a little bit more structure, and you can have something like you're running a test and you can write letters about what this is doing. So for example, it should have some default, for example, right? And it has like a more BDD structure. So another option that I saw was Ginkgo, and for example, for some reason Ginkgo is okay, but the other one is not. That somewhat just uses more or less the same ideas for the BDD. I explored just Spec. I didn't explore Ginkgo, but I do believe that there's like some sort of like an issue with Ginkgo, that Ginkgo doesn't do very well with threading, if I'm not mistaken, and it is like a more complete framework instead of being like just a thin wrapper like Spec is. And you can see that Spec, a lot of things are just passed around with the testing T around, while Ginkgo even has its own implementation of the testing T. So it completely isolates the Go framework from testing framework. The other part of this that I was looking at was that we kind of currently do all the assertions by hand, which is okay. But then our assertions will have to implement like our own methods. And if we, for example, if we try to see this assert bundle lock, we try to do something like we compare the objects, and then we need to do a fatal to then say like what we expect it to do. And I thought there must be a better way. Like do we really need to do this if statement when we're just trying to compare, like, for example, 2 strings? And as a matter of fact, there are some other options that I collected here that could help us out, making the tests a little bit more readable. When you read like the assertion, you know what is being asserted on. So like I looked into, again, this link is broken. Fine, I'll just cut this here. So I looked into Testify, that basically it's just an assertion library that allows you to have like commands like, I want to assert that this is equal, and then you have the expected and then the actual value, and then you can have like a sentence if you want to, and say like, oh, I wanted oranges, or like I was expecting oranges and that's not what you gave me. And I think this way it's a little bit easier to understand what we're trying to compare and what we're trying to do. And there's like a bunch of assertions on this library that we could piggyback on. Another option, it was GoMega, and GoMega is an assertion, it's a matching library. It's not an assertion library, which kind of, I don't understand much the difference, but it's more or less the same thing, right? And this is the library that is recommended to use with Ginkgo, and it basically contains more or less the same functionality as require. Did I click in a place that I was expecting to see all available matchers? So it is a little bit of a different syntax, but in the end, it is doing the same thing. It's saying that, is this the value that I have? It should be equal to blah, right? So this is more or less like the frameworks. The other option that I was told about, to be fair, I did not investigate this a lot. There's like this library that can be used for YTT tests that allows you to do some matching for us, and it brings by default some matchers that you can check out here. So there are like some functions, and it works in a similar way to other assertion matching libraries, right?
Yeah, this
So,
is a specific matcher for Gamega. Like this only works with Gamega, I believe.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah.
So thanks for clearing that out, Dennis. So, and like I started this discussion to try to understand if there were like other ideas, and I attached to that a little bit of a like a prototype, let's call it, of a I picked up this one particular file and I said like, okay, I'm going to try to convert this test file into a spec testify testing file instead of what we have, right? And I created some pluses and minuses around like after my experience, but let me just scroll down. Do I have? No, I cannot do that thing. So there's like already some, Dimitri did some comments here, but in the end, if we look at this, it becomes, I think, a little bit easier to reason about what is being done in terms of testing, what we're trying to test, and then our assertions, I think they become a little bit more understandable if there's like a lot of text there. But things like this, I believe it become a little bit more understandable and could help us out. And also the thing that I like about this is that we can have a resemblance of structure where the tests like feed from the parent test that gives you like even a broader information. So for example, if we see naming wise, we're doing a copy bundle image test, and it should preserve the copy bundle image. It preserves the annotation, right? Or if we go, I have like an example where we have like multiple layers, for example, for this one. The copy bundle image tests when the images of the bundle are co-located with the bundle, it copies the images and creates the bundle when -- lock output is provided. I think like this provides a much better information about what this test is giving and what this test is testing really, instead of us trying to read through. There's like a description about this test. Let me see if I can, is this the file? Let me check, go back. So there you go. So like this, I think this is the test, like test copy bundle with co-located referenced images to repo, destination, and output. So like this is this is like the test that was converted from here into too many tabs here into like these lines. And I believe that it feels a little bit better and allows us to isolate. If we want, for example, to have some setup that we want to do, we can move that setup into before blocks. And to be fair, like this commit that I have here, it's more like these are the things that we can do. It doesn't like try to say this is the way we should do tests and the tests should look like this, right? It's more like what are the possibilities that we have given these two frameworks. And yeah, I think that is more or less it. I tried to open this and see if there was like other people that were interested in experimenting with other frameworks, but I'm the only one here. So, but in the end, what I saw in terms of like differences for spec in particular is that spec is like a thin wrapper around testing T, so it still keeps all the goods that come from the testing package from Go with it. So it does all the things that the testing T does. It gives us like a well-known terms like when and it that translate into the messages on the command line when you run go tests. Oh, by the way, like these run with, if you just go do go test and you have tests with testing T like the base standard library testing plus spec, they all run without you having to do anything, because it is the same infrastructure that it's used. The other thing is that you can focus particular tests while currently there's no real way to do it. Allows us to skip a particular test as well. It has no extra dependencies whatsoever. So the only dependency it has is on top of testing. And the test names can now be full sentences to describe the behavior that we expect. One thing that I noticed is that sometimes nesting can be a little bit hard to follow. If you have like a lot of, if you do tests that are like very big that do a lot of things, then it might be hard for you to follow along what is like the context that you're in. So that was one thing that I saw that could be improved. Not could be improved. I don't think the library in itself needs improvement, but it's something that we need to be aware of when we're writing tests. And for the the Testify assertion library, what I saw is that it has like a better error output, and without you having to do much, you can say like this bananas need to be equal to apples, and then it already has a phrase for you and says like, oh, but the expected bananas are not equal to the apples that you provided, right? So like it has a better error messaging just out of the box. I think it makes it easier to read the purpose of the tests when you're looking at it and you say just like not equal. This might be like a flaw I have, but I'm a little bit of a Boolean impaired person. And when I have to look at nots and ands and so on, it takes me a lot of time. While if I just have like this written in English, it makes it easier, at least for me. It has a lot of pre-built assertions and also allows the developer to group assertions into blocks. So there are two different types of, there are assertions and there are requires. And the assertions, you can do like 10 assertions and it will fail in the end of the test unless you use require, and require fails at the point where if there's a failure. So like you can group assertions if you want to assert like in different parts of like an output, for example. So that's something that's neat. So the things that I saw as a downside, it takes some time to convert tests, especially because we already have like a full breadth of tests, right? And it has some third-party dependencies, so it brings some extra dependencies to our code. So that's basically what I have to present in terms of like this experiment that I did with spec and Testify. I don't know if anyone has anything that they'd like to share, if they tried to do this with different libraries or something, or if they have any kind of comment and so on. What I would like, before we do that, what I'd like to get is more or less try to understand if this is a pattern that we like, and that's something that we would be willing to start using. And if so, I would like to see this, if that's something that we want to implement, I'd like to see like whenever we do some change in the code that we start including our like these new frameworks and so on. That would be like my goal with this experiment here. So I'll open the floor to, does anyone have any question, have anything that they want to show, something like that?
I mean, I prefer the BDD nested structure a lot. It just makes it, I agree, easier to read. In my head, while you were going through spec and you were going through, was it Testify as the assertion library? In my head, I was like, because I have prior experience with Ginkgo and Gamega, and there's a almost complete overlap in terms of, the Ginkgo to spec and in my head, Gamega to Testify. They have context and whens and its nested into each other. And even the way that assertions are made, something should equal this, then whatever. That looks pretty similar. I'm just wondering about the activity, like how well supported, Testify and spec is. I know Ginkgo and Gamega is actively developed, and they have releases pretty frequently. I'm wondering about how popular spec is, for example, or how widely used it is. That's something that's unknown to me.
So to answer that, like Testify, it has a lot of stars in here,
Yeah.
and they release pretty frequently. To be fair, like in a library like this, I expect this to be released frequently, while the testing framework for this one in particular, it's not like Steven usually doesn't do like a lot of updates, because in the end, this is a very thin library. The only thing that this library provides to you is just the readability of the tests, and gives you some sort of like a structure where you can call befores and afters, and that's it. So it's not, I don't think there's like a lot being developed right now, because in the end, the idea behind this library was to create just a thin wrapper on top of testing T that could provide you some BDD-like behavior. It's just that. So a very simple library.
Okay, so
when you're
sorry.
done, you're done.
Yeah, okay, so Ginkgo and spec maybe differ in that Ginkgo can be used as a very thin library. It could just be used as using before, afters, and its and whens if you like, but it also offers a lot more functionality that we may or may not find valuable. I know you mentioned it was harder to write parallel tests in Ginkgo, but I'm pretty sure they have first-class support for actually making assertions when you run, Go routines in your test. And that's just part of a Ginkgo framework.
From what I know, is that the parallelization on Ginkgo was created before testing T, or the standard library was able to parallelize tests. So that's a good thing. But the problem now is that, at least this is the knowledge that I had like maybe a year ago or something, that because they do not rely a lot on the testing library, they now have their own implementation of the testing, of the parallelization of the tests. It is a parallelization of the tests that I'm talking about.
Okay.
It's like their own, instead of using the testing that comes with Go, right? So
yeah, I think you can opt in to use the testing object, or if you use Ginkgo's, you can run tests in parallel, but you got to know what you're doing. You don't want test pollution when you're running tests in parallel, essentially. Yeah, and it also does allow a really nice way to, if you have parallelism in your implementation code, they have nice primitives to help you test up, Go routines running in your implementation as well.
Yeah, just to add on to that, I think my experience in seeing parallelization issues has usually been just not structuring the tests and isolating them properly, or using shared resources and having contention. So that's, I think, mainly on us to be able to structure those things well.
Cool, John, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I was thinking about what are the needs that drive us here. So one of them is that test names, as they are hard to read, that the sections of the arrange, act, assert can be hard to suss out. Yeah, I agree with a lot of that. Dennis and I saw a real improvement in the schema tests that we just reworked a little bit of organization. The T object, that testing.T object provides that run function, which is kind of nice when you're looking at spec tests. They can seem very similar to that, because I'm used to seeing the T.run. It could be a spec.run. The other things that come up for me are the before and after are not available in the built-in testing framework. And there's hacks that you can do to make that work, but it's pretty hacky. So that's a really big win from my perspective, to be able to set per test, set up and tear down, and also because you can layer things a little bit. And I echo your concern about you can go nuts. There's more rope here than you need. to get the job done in terms of nesting context. You could very quickly create a maintenance problem in the other direction. But it does provide a really nice, smooth way of including before and afters. The one thing that I'm just trying to add to the conversation, doesn't mean this is a big deal, but it's an important one for me personally, is I know there's a number of us who use IDEs. Want to make sure that whatever we use can be, even if it's a little bit of work to get it working with the IDE, we live in that, we code in that, we TDD in that. For those that do, want to make sure that those workflows wouldn't be broken. And then I wonder, did you run into any kind of assertion that would show a diff? Like, we've got a number of tests where we have like multi-line strings, and we want to show the difference between the expected and the result, and want to show like a patch style diff. Does Testify have that? Do you know that off the top of your head?
Testify has a bunch of assertions for you at your
Okay,
leisure.
I'll go
So
look for it.
in the end, like
Just wonder
they
if
do
you've
have
seen that.
like, so like these are like the basics that everybody has, right? But I do believe that they have a lot of like comparison and the output, but oh my god, that's not what I want to click.
We don't have to research right now. I was just
Yeah.
wondering if you knew off the top of your head. So yeah, there's this bit where there's quite a bit of subjectivity in like readability, and some of those other things. But I feel like from where I'm standing, I could see a real improvement here. And more importantly to me is like that we have actually more plays in our playbook with like the ability to set up and tear down context easily. If the other thing actually that is a big deal is the approachability of our projects to open source contributors. So I think that I wouldn't look at stars per se as some kind of indicator, but or some kind of direct measure, but like they do indicate a little bit of how many folks are out there would probably be able to look at your tests and not just be able to read them, but be able to contribute. So this is part of, I think, why the built-in testing is appealing, because everybody's got it. It's a lot of material for it. So that's a thing I think we want to keep in mind, make sure that we don't create inadvertent potential barriers by like, okay, well, and additionally, you got to learn this other thing. If learning this other thing really maps well to what I would already know, that seems legit, but yeah.
Cool, thanks, John. Does anyone have anything else they would like to say? I would also like to be constant that we do have another topic. So my idea is that we can maybe discuss here, and then we can try to make this some sort of like an asynchronous, maybe an asynchronous discussion where I can create something in Slack, and then we can contribute if there's any questions, if there's like any other options, and eventually we could create some sort of like a poll or just to see if that's something that we would like to undertake or not as like the next steps for us.
Yeah, can I suggest, like, I think this breathes life by talking about it together, breathes life into your discussion. I know you pointed to it before, but like, if folks had additional thoughts that come up after having seen this and had a chance to go look at things themselves and have questions, that the discussion that you started with this, rich example and all this stuff, good place to get that going.
That's definitely a good idea.
Cool.
Just last minor comment. I realized that one of the points here is take some time to convert tests as one of kind of the counterpoints here. And maybe this is implied and people are thinking that way, but an easier way to like convert would not be to like do like a big like convert all the tests. I'm thinking of this as like more of like a update things kind of as we need to. Would be a nice way to kind of introduce this.
That's definitely a good idea. When I said this, it was, why did I say this here? Because in the end, I kind of had to rejigger some of the tests in order to make this work. So like even when I did like a file, right? But it's like this one file took me some time because I had to rejigger a lot of parts in order to put this into this format and to make sure that the format made sense and so on. And when we're doing the assertions, I had also had to change some things here and there. So that was the only thing that I was trying to call out here. It might not be just as simple as pick up the function name, replace that with a string in English in the testing framework, and then just go and find the equal and replace that with a assert dot equal or something like that, right? So it was more just a call out to that, but that's a good point. Cool. Anything else?
Thanks for doing all that homework, man. Appreciate it.
So as the next steps, I'm going to leave this here for maybe a week more, and then I'll maybe try to create a poll or something to see if that's something that we want to take over. If there are other ideas, just put them into this discussion. I'll share the discussion in here, and maybe I can later add it to the other to the meeting notes, so we can go there and we'll see if we want to undertake this or not. Thank you. And Ellen,
Well,
it's all
thanks.
yours.
Trying to do that right now. Add that GitHub issue to our HackMD agenda. Let's see if that worked.
If we want to talk about the next item, I can share my screen and go over that a little bit.
Yeah, the next item is command to validate data values.
Yeah, so this is an issue that I filed. It was inspired by an issue that Danny Herberich filed for generating data values file skeletons. He proposed a command to validate a data values file. I thought it was a great idea, and I think it goes well with sort of the work that we're doing around schemas. So to kind of incorporate that idea into schemas, I propose a top-level command in YTT to basically validate the data values that you've given. So basically, what this command would be able to provide in addition to like what YTT does currently with schemas is it would be able to provide more information about what may be wrong in your data values file. Currently, if you run YTT-F with your files and your schema and your include experimental schema flag, of course, because this work is feature flagged currently. That command will either fail or succeed. Fail with some errors. Your data values file did not adhere to your schema, and so that is an error. Otherwise, it will succeed. But we think that there may be some additional information that will be helpful to know in addition to just failing or succeeding, such as warnings for like YTT best practices. So one example I gave here was if you have a value defined in your schema and say it's foo apple, and then you redefine that same value in your data values file, totally valid, totally acceptable, but maybe we want to provide a warning to let the user know that this value was defined twice to the same thing. and maybe that's not what you meant to do. So for context around schemas, basically your schema definition file acts as both a contract for your data values files and a default value. So basically by passing in this schema, you will have a data value foo apple. By adding another schema or another data values file on top of that, basically acts as an overlay on your schema. So you could change foo to a different value. There's been some discussion in here, some really great points. Basically, I think Stephen brought up some good points about like, what do we want to recommend for best practices for YTT? That'll kind of inspire what it is that we would want to give warnings on. Like what would not be recommended, what would we want to warn users not to do. And another example that Stephen and Joao came up with was a configuration author would want to provide a single instance for a deployment. Say in your schema file, you have like replicas 1. But the configuration author recommends that the consumer of the configuration change that later on to a more acceptable value. So we could warn the user about that. Another use case is unused data values. Basically, you can provide as many data values as you want in your schema or your data value file, but you don't have to use them. And that's not an error, but it may be indicative of, well, maybe you accidentally hard-coded something, or maybe you meant to use those values, but didn't. And Daniel also mentioned that this is similar to linting. Yeah, I'll let you all talk more about your points if you feel like wasn't captured in my synopsis, but I'm curious from the people here, like, does this have enough value to be its own command, or do we feel like we want to do this like the way that we're doing it now, which is basically fail if there is an error, and we can report warnings to standard error, which is kind of how this works now.
My current belief is that this is valuable, but should probably exist within the same schema command.
The same schema command as in like YTT-F.
Right, the same normal templating command. I really love the idea of the fail on warnings flag, because this to me is just a bunch of warnings that, well, yeah, you may have duplicated a message, or pardon me, an extra data value, or you may not be using something that you specified. That to me isn't an error, it is just a warning. And so offering the consumer the ability to fail if any of those conditions are true, I think might be nice. But it seems, I don't know, perhaps small enough that it shouldn't be its own top level command while being big enough to offer an intermediary flag.
Yeah, I think some advantages of using a flag rather than a top level command would be like, you can go through the exact same flow that you would otherwise if you're maybe piping the output of YTT into another tool and you include the flag fail on warnings, then you'll never make it to that second step. Fails early. You don't really have to change the way that you use the tool, which I think would be nice.
Part of what I really like the spirit of this idea is that it's getting to the heart of it points to the heart of a part of the overall problem we have with YTT adoption, which is there's various potential barriers sitting in front of a new user of YTT. And some of it is education, and some of it is us like helping the tool be more cognitively empathetic. You know, Garrett's heading up like a yeoman's effort in trying to like make that second part better. But there's also this first part, like in terms of guides that we want to write in the documentation to like meet people halfway about where they're at. And this feels like another potential ingredient for improving the overall experience, especially as somebody's getting started with the tool, where we know that there are probably widespread assumptions that one might bring. There are assumptions that many folks might bring with them to using the tool that like fall invalid. And it's just the tool has a slightly different philosophy, and how do we kindly share that? There's this counterbalance in my head of we also there's a kind of an aspect of that in being concise. So there's real value in keeping the messaging and the signal that we're getting from the tool to be tight, compact, if you will, like high signal, low noise. And so then that makes me wonder about like, yeah, maybe that linting thing. So anyway, I really appreciate the exploration here. I'm personally like really torn about like what the interaction ought to be personally, but I love that we're digging into this because I think it's a very subtle. No one's directly asking for, "Hey, can you make your education experience better?" But that's one of the big things that's in front of us, I believe, with this tool.
I do think there's like this kind of idea that's come out of this of like what really the scope should be of this feature, like whether or not we just want to focus on things like data values in this case, and like in some cases like should it maybe only apply like if we're like validating things against schemas to another extent. I think maybe that's like where it should be like refined a little bit more, is like, or like do we want to maybe like, would something like this be more valuable to like start with this like more specific case of like validating data values, and then like maybe we evolve it from there, because I really think that something like having like something that gives you a more opinionated idea about like how you should work with YTT, like beyond just even like your data values file, would be really valuable, and like maybe would be really helpful for people who are using it, not even just as like first time users, but like day-to-day users of it, help them like learn better ways of like working with the tool. So maybe that's like something to think about with it, is like how valuable is this like overall, like beyond like doing this data values validation, and like maybe would it like just, but like would it make more sense to like maybe start there from like just how to like see if this feature like adds a lot of value to people's life, like to really put it in that scope to start.
Yeah, that's a great prompt. Like, how do we know that this is really adding value? I think one way that we can kind of get more data on that is adding use cases, seeing what use cases this could help with. And I know we have like 3 or so in here, but if we think of more, I think it'd be really helpful to add them to this issue. Like, here's a case where we could inform the user of a better practice, or this is a pain point that we've seen right now. Be super helpful to add that in here, get more data.
To be fair, like talking about the difference between this being a high-level command or being like a flag, I see these as two different use cases, right? Where there's a use case where you want to use the tool YTT in order to generate some YAML that then you want to pipe to something else, or you want to generate the file, and that's one use case, right? And that's the use case of someone that received the YAML and they just want to generate the YAML and just put it into Kubernetes, for example, right? Me as that person, I don't care if there's any warnings in the YAML, because a lot of those times you're not even the one generating those YAMLs, right? You're just consuming them. The other side, where I am the person that is developing the YAMLs and the YTT templates and so on, I think I would prefer to have a way to tell me, like, is this correct? Because why should I call YTT to generate templates and give me a wall of YAML just so that I have to go scroll up to see if there was any warning, or that I need to add like another flag? I think we are catering to two different users with using the using the flag or using a command. So personally, I think that the validate gives you more like this idea of like, okay, I want to make sure that what I'm generating is okay, is good. While YTT, when I call YTT, I want to generate my YAML. In some way I care about the correctness of it, but I just want to generate my YAML and pipe it into something that will apply it, for example, right? So.
Yeah, that's a great call out. Well, we're running out of time here, so please add your thoughts to the issue, any use cases that you think of that may be able to be solved by Validate.
Sounds good. Thanks, Carrie and everyone for the discussion. So again, a reminder, next week we'll meet on Monday, 11:30 a.m. Pacific time. So cool. Have a great day, everyone. Bye.